This story is titled, My Brother Slept with My Fiancée for 6 months. My family said, get over it. So I vanished and built a life they'll never be part of, and now they want back. I'll just say it up front, because there's no softer way to ease into this. This is the kind of story where a guy spends his entire life doing everything right for everybody else and gets absolutely nothing in return until the day he finally stops. And what he builds after that is the only reason it's even worth telling. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. I'd been with my fiancée Rachel, 27F, for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. And the wedding was 3 months away when everything blew up. The invitations were already sent, the venue locked in, the honeymoon planned, her dress hanging in our closet like proof that this was really happening. I had my vows saved in my phone and used to practice them in the shower like an idiot, thinking about the look on her face when I said them. She was supposed to be the person I was building everything around. Then there's my little brother Kyle, 26 months younger than me. Our dad bounced when we were kids, and I stepped in without anyone asking, helped raise him, took on more than any kid should at that age, because that's what you do when you're the oldest and your family needs you. Mom worked 2 jobs, so at 15 I was doing grocery runs, making sure Kyle had clean clothes for school, helping him with homework even when I still had my own to finish. I was basically a second parent before I was old enough to drive, and Kyle got used to it, got used to someone always being there to catch him. When Mom couldn't afford his college, I paid for it. Not partially, not with help, just paid it. He dropped out after 3 semesters, and nobody said a word about the money. I didn't either, because that's what I did. I absorbed it and moved on. Last year, when he lost his job, I let him crash at my place for 6 months rent-free. I bought his groceries, drove him to interviews, covered his phone bill until he got back on his feet, even helped him rewrite his resume because the one he had looked like he typed it on his phone in 5 minutes, which he probably did. When he finally landed something, I was the first person he called, and I was genuinely happy for him. I made him my best man. That's how much I trusted this kid. So a few weeks ago, when I came home early from work because a meeting got canceled last minute, I thought I'd surprise Rachel with flowers. I stopped at the grocery store on the way and grabbed a bouquet of sunflowers because they were her favorite. I was in a good mood, radio on, windows down, thinking about the wedding, thinking about how we were almost there 3 months out. I walked through the front door, set my keys on the counter like I always do, heard something from the bedroom, and headed that way. And I found Kyle in bed with her. My bed, my house, my brother. The flowers slipped out of my hand and hit the floor, and they started scrambling around like roaches when the lights come on. I knew immediately this wasn't the first time. You don't move that in sync after one mistake. This had been going on. Rachel tried to say something, but I just held up my hand, turned around, walked out, got in my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going and didn't care. I just drove until my head felt like it might split open, then pulled into some random parking lot and sat there while my whole life collapsed inside my chest. I remember staring at my hands on the steering wheel, watching them shake, not from anger but from shock, like my body understood what happened before my brain caught up. 4 years with this woman, everything I'd built, gone in the time it took to open a bedroom door. The sunflowers were still on the bedroom floor. I kept thinking about that, how they were just lying there in their plastic wrapper while my life ended. Within an hour my phone was blowing up. Rachel, Kyle, Mom, all of them calling like they were taking shifts. I put it on silent and watched the notifications stack up as if it was happening to someone else. Eventually I checked into the cheapest hotel I could find off the highway, one of those places where the hallway ice machine doesn't work and the carpet looks like it hasn't been replaced since the 90s. I sat on a bed that smelled like cleaning chemicals and stared at a blank wall. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just replayed every conversation I'd had with Rachel over the last 6 months, trying to figure out what I missed. There was a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a boot, and I stared at it for so long I can still see it when I close my eyes. I kept picking up my phone to call someone, then realizing there was nobody left to call. The people I would have turned to were the people who did this. Then Mom texted, "Grant, please come home. We need to talk about this as a family." As a family. Like my brother hadn't just blown up my entire life. 2 days later, there was a family meeting at Mom's house, and I showed up because she begged me to, because some part of me still believed blood meant something, because I still believed in these people that I thought blood actually meant something, that it counted for something when everything else fell apart, but the second I walked into that house and saw everyone already seated in the living room, I realized how wrong I'd been. Mom was there. Kyle. Rachel. My Aunt Linda, my Uncle Robert, my older sister Michelle. All of them arranged neatly on the couches like this was some kind of intervention staged for me, not for the guy who'd been sleeping with my fiancée, but for me, the one who got cheated on. There was a plate of cookies sitting on the coffee table like this was a normal family get-together. Cookies. I remember staring at them and thinking my mom actually baked snacks for this. Mom told me to sit down in that soft, careful voice people use when they've already decided you're being unreasonable. I didn't sit. I stayed standing and asked why Rachel was there. Mom said because we need to discuss this like adults. I said there's nothing to discuss. I caught them in my bed. That's not a discussion. That's a verdict. Kyle immediately launched into the red eyes and apology tour, saying he never meant for it to happen, that it just happened like 6 months of betrayal was some kind of accident. He was sitting in my dad's old brown chair in the corner, the one nobody ever uses, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together the way he's done since we were kids whenever he's nervous. I asked how long. Rachel tried to dodge it, stared at the floor, said it wasn't that simple. I asked again. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. While I was working overtime to pay for the honeymoon she wanted. While I was making her coffee every morning and texting her "love you" on my lunch breaks like a loyal idiot. While I was planning an entire future around this woman. Sitting at my desk at work scrolling through venue photos and reception playlists and seating charts. 6 months of lies delivered straight to my face. Every morning she kissed me goodbye and then what? Waited for me to pull out of the driveway? Every night I came home exhausted. She asked about my day, I told her everything, and she nodded and smiled while hiding this, and I never suspected a thing because why would I? These were the two people I trusted most on this planet. When I think about the timeline, it makes me physically sick. 6 months means it started while Kyle was still living with us, while I was paying for his food and his car insurance and driving him to interviews. I was literally funding his life while he was sleeping with my fiancée in the next room. Every dinner the three of us ate together at that kitchen table, he knew, she knew, and I was the only one who didn't. Then Rachel had the nerve to say they were in love. Tears in her eyes like she was the victim, claiming they tried to fight it, but you can't help who you fall for. My Aunt Linda told me not to be crude when I responded to that, actually told me not to be crude and said this was hard for everyone. My mom put her hand on my arm and said, "Kyle is your brother. Family forgives," and then added, "Maybe it was better this happened before the wedding." Like she was doing me some kind of favor. My sister Michelle called me dramatic, said Kyle and Rachel felt terrible and didn't want to hurt me. They didn't want to hurt me. They just did it for 6 straight months and hoped I'd never find out. And when I reacted, my mom snapped at me about my language. Not at Kyle. Not at Rachel. At me. My language was the issue in that room. Not the betrayal, not the 6 months. Not the fact that my brother and my fiancé had been lying to my face every day. My language. That's when something inside me went completely calm. Dead calm. I looked around at all of them and said, "Let me get this straight. Kyle sleeps with my fiancé for 6 months in my house. In my bed. And I'm the one who needs to calm down." Mom said, "He's your brother." I said, "Not anymore." The room went silent, like the air got sucked out of it. I looked at Kyle and told him he was dead to me. I told Rachel she could keep the ring, consider it payment for the 4 years I wasted. Then I looked at my mother and told her she chose him, and that's fine, but choices have consequences. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my door. We're done. I walked out. Nobody followed. Nobody chased after me. Nobody said a single word. They just stayed seated. I got in my car and sat in the driveway for a while, staring at the house through the living room window. They were all still there. Mom was the first to move. She stood up, walked over to Kyle, and put her arm around him. Around him, I watched my mother comfort the son who just destroyed my life. That's the last image I have of my family. My mom holding Kyle while I sat alone in the driveway. They made their choice. I made mine. I'll update when there's more to tell. Well, Grant, you walked into that room expecting support, And what you got instead was an intervention for being upset that your brother slept with your fiancée for 6 months, and your aunt told you not to be crude. Your mom corrected your language. Your sister called you dramatic. Not one person in that room said what Kyle did was wrong, and you still walked out without screaming or begging. That's not dramatic. That's a man who saw exactly where he stood. Let's move on to the first update. Update 1. I went back to the house a couple days later. Rachel's clothes were already gone. Some of my stuff too. She'd been efficient about it, which told me this probably wasn't chaos for her. She likely had an exit strategy the whole time. Leave me. Move in with Kyle. Play the we fell in love card so she didn't look like the villain. She had it mapped out. I was the only one who didn't know. That same night, I called a real estate agent and put the house on the market. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't walk into the bedroom without seeing them. Every corner of that place held something that reminded me of her, or him, or both of them at the same time. Her shampoo was still sitting in the shower. There was a magnet on the fridge from a trip we took together. A sticky note was still on the hallway mirror that said, "I love you. Have a good day." In her handwriting from about 2 months ago, something I'd never bothered to take down. I peeled it off that night, stood there holding it for a second, then threw it in the trash. Need it out. The next morning I called my boss about a transfer we'd talked about months earlier, in a different state. Rachel had begged me not to take it because it was too far from family. Funny how that works out. He told me I could start in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to dismantle an entire life. I packed mostly in garbage bags because I didn't have boxes, just shoved everything into black bags and loaded my car. The calls kept coming the whole time. Mom, Michelle, Aunt Linda, all of them telling me to reconsider, to forgive, to be the bigger person. Not one apology. Not one. Just guilt trips and family is family on repeat. My aunt even left a voicemail saying, "You're tearing this family apart." Me, I'm tearing it apart. Not Kyle. Not Rachel. Me for being upset. I blocked every one of them. 3 days before I left, Kyle showed up at the house, pounding on the door, shouting my name through the wood, repeating that he was sorry, like saying it enough times would make it mean something. I watched him through the window, standing on the porch I rebuilt last summer. The same porch he helped me stain one weekend back when things were still normal. We'd ordered pizza that day, sat outside in old clothes while the stain dried on the rails, eating straight from the box. He was practicing his best man toast, kept messing up the same line, and we were both laughing so hard about it. Normal brother stuff. The kind of afternoon you don't think twice about until it's gone forever. And now he was standing on that same porch asking me to let him in. I didn't. I let him stand there until he ran out of words. At one point he sat down on the steps, head in his hands, stayed there a while, then eventually got up and left. I closed the blinds and went back to packing. On moving day, I loaded the last bag into my car. The house was empty except for the furniture I'd sold with it. I stood in the kitchen for a minute. That was where I proposed to Rachel, right by the counter. I'd made this whole dinner, burned the chicken, had to order backup from a restaurant down the street, then pretended I'd made it all myself. She knew. She laughed about it and still said yes. That memory used to make me smile. Now it just made me feel stupid. I took one last look around, locked the door, left the key under the mat for the real estate agent, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't look back. Whoever I'd been in that house, that was someone else. The first night in the new city, I sat on the floor because I didn't even have furniture yet. Just a sleeping bag, a suitcase, and cold takeout from a teriyaki spot down the block, which I ate mostly because I hadn't figured out where anything else was. The apartment was completely empty. My voice echoed when I talked on the phone. The fridge made this strange humming sound that was so loud in the silence it almost felt like company. I sat there watching the lights outside the window and thought, this is what it feels like when nobody needs anything from you. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind where your phone doesn't buzz every 20 minutes and nobody's crying and nobody. I walked out. Nobody followed. Nobody chased after me. Nobody said a single thing. They just sat there. I got in my car and sat in the driveway for a while. Through the living room window, I could see them all still sitting there. Mom was the first to move. She stood up and walked straight to Kyle and put her arm around him, and I just sat there and watched my mother comfort the son who had just destroyed my life. That's the last image I have of my family, burned into me like it's permanent. My mom holding Kyle while I sat alone in the driveway. They made their choice. I made mine. I said I'd update when there was more to tell. Well, Grant, you walked into that room expecting support, and instead you got what felt like an intervention for being upset that your brother slept with your fiancée for 6 months. Your aunt told you not to be crude. Your mom corrected your language. Your sister called you dramatic. Not one person in that room said what Kyle did was wrong, and you still walked out without screaming or begging. That's not dramatic. That's a man who saw exactly where he stood. So here's the first update. Update 1. I went back to the house after a couple of days. Rachel's clothes were already gone. Some of my stuff too. She'd been efficient about it. Probably had an exit strategy the whole time. Leave me, move in with Kyle, play the we fell in love card so she didn't look like the villain. She had the whole thing mapped out. I was the only one who didn't know. I called a real estate agent that same night and put the house on the market. Couldn't stay there. Couldn't walk into the bedroom without seeing them. Every corner of that house had something that reminded me of her or him or both. The bathroom still had her shampoo in the shower. The kitchen had a magnet on the fridge from a trip we took together. There was a sticky note on the mirror in the hallway that said, "I love you. Have a good day." In her handwriting from like 2 months ago that I just never taken down. I took it down that night, held it for a second, then threw it in the trash. Need it out. The next morning I called my boss about a transfer we'd talked about months ago. Different state. Rachel had begged me not to take it because it was too far from family. Funny how that works out. He said I could start in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to take apart an entire life. I packed in garbage bags mostly because I didn't have boxes. Just shoved everything into black bags and loaded up my car. The whole time the calls kept coming. Mom, Michelle, Aunt Linda all begging me to reconsider, to forgive, to be the bigger person. Not one of those calls included an apology. Not one, just guilt trips and family as family on repeat. My aunt left a voicemail where she literally said, "You're tearing this family apart." Me, I'm tearing it apart. Not Kyle. Not Rachel. Me for being upset. I blocked every single one of them. Kyle showed up at my house 3 days before I left, banging on the door, calling my name through the wood, saying he was sorry over and over like repetition would make it mean something. I watched him through the window. I started dating eventually. Nothing serious at first. I wasn't ready, but it felt good to be around somebody who wasn't actively betraying me behind my back. Low bar, I know. I went on a few dates that went nowhere. One girl talked about her ex for 45 minutes straight. Another one spent the whole dinner on her phone. I wasn't really putting myself out there. Honestly, more just going through the motions to prove I could. Then I met Audrey. She was a 4th grade teacher, funny, with this laugh that made everybody around her smile whether they wanted to or not. I met her at a friend's cookout. She was wearing this ridiculous sun hat that was way too big and she kept pushing it out of her eyes. I said something dumb about the hat and she goes, "This hat has been to 4 countries and it's never let me down." And I just thought, okay, I like this person. We hit it off. No games, no performance, no walking on eggshells. Our first date was at this little Vietnamese place where the whole menu was in Vietnamese and neither of us could read a word of it. So we just pointed at random stuff and agreed to eat whatever showed up. Half of it was amazing. The other half, I still don't know what one of the dishes was. She ate it anyway and just said, "Adventure." About 6 months in, she asked about my family. I told her everything. She looked at me like I just told her the sky was green. "So they chose your brother and his mistress over you?" "Yep. And they think you need to apologize?" "I guess I'm being dramatic." She took my hand and said, "Grant, that's not family. That's people using you. You did the right thing getting out." Nobody had ever put it that plainly. For the first time since everything happened, I actually believed I'd done the right thing. The texts from my old life trickled in for months after. Different numbers. Friends of friends. Distant relatives I'd talked to maybe twice in the last 5 years who suddenly had opinions. All the same script. "Your family misses you. Haven't you punished them enough? Life is too short. You only get one family. That was the tone of the messages that kept coming. One cousin I barely knew sent me a 3-paragraph message about forgiveness that read like she copied it off a greeting card. Not one of those messages said what happened to you was wrong. Not one. Nobody said Kyle shouldn't have done what he did. Nobody said the family should have had my back. Just a bunch of people who wanted me to make it easier for everyone else by pretending I was fine. Then there was one from Mom's number saying Kyle and Rachel broke up and he was really struggling and needed his brother. They broke up. 6 months of destroying my life and they couldn't even last a year together. That's what they burned it all down for. A relationship that didn't even survive 4 seasons. I blocked that number too. Kyle and Rachel couldn't even last a year. Their whole thing was built on sneaking around. Once Grant was gone and there was nobody left to hide from, they had nothing. And every message from the family followed the same script. Haven't you punished them enough? Not one apology. They didn't miss Grant. They missed what he did for them. Now let's move on to Update 2. Update 2. My Uncle Robert messaged me. The same guy who sat there silent at the family meeting. He said Mom had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. Treatable, but she was asking for me. He added that he knew what happened was messed up. But she's my mother and I should call her. I stared at that message for about an hour. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, reading it over and over. My gut told me it was a trap, that they'd use Mom's diagnosis to guilt me back into being the fixer, the reliable one, the guy who absorbs everything. I'd seen this play before. Different crisis, same script. Call Grant, he'll figure it out. But she had cancer. And no matter how much I'd buried it, she was still my mom. She was still the woman who worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. Who sat with me at the kitchen table helping me with college applications even though she was exhausted. That version of her still lived in my head, even if the real version had let me down. So I called my uncle and asked how bad it was. Stage 1 caught early. Surgery, then radiation. She was going to be fine. I asked if Mom had actually told him to reach out. He paused, then admitted Michelle set it up. Of course she did. My sister pulling strings again, using Mom's diagnosis as bait. I told him to tell Mom I hope her treatment goes well, but I'm not coming back. Then I hung up. I felt like garbage for about 3 days. I couldn't focus at work. Couldn't eat right. I just walked around with this weight on my chest that wouldn't go away. Audrey held me while I cried for the first time since I left. We were sitting on the couch. Some baseball game was on in the background. Nobody was watching. I just completely lost it. Everything I'd been stuffing down for over a year came out all at once. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't lecture me. She just held on and let me get through it. Mom's treatment went fine. I know because Michelle posted about it online. Pictures from the hospital. Captions about family rallying together. Not one mention of the son who wasn't there. I didn't expect there to be. About 18 months after I left, I got an email from Rachel. It was long, the kind of apology that's clearly been rewritten a dozen times. She said she and Kyle had been done for months. Called the whole thing a mistake. Said she threw away the best thing that ever happened to her for someone who couldn't even commit. That Kyle turned out to be exactly who I always told her he was. Unreliable, immature, unable to follow through on anything. She said the affair started because she was lonely and Kyle was there and she made the worst decision of her life. She wasn't asking for another chance. She just wanted me to know she understood what she lost and that she hoped I was doing okay. I read it twice. Sat with it for about 10 minutes. Then I deleted it and blocked her email. That apology wasn't for me. It was for her. So she could feel like she did the right thing by saying sorry and move on with a clear conscience. And that part about Kyle being unreliable? She didn't figure that out during the 6 months she was sleeping with him in my guest bedroom. She needed 18 more months to come to that conclusion. She can find closure somewhere else. 2 years after I moved, I proposed to Audrey. I took her to this overlook point we'd hiked to early in our relationship. We'd been there on our 3rd date and she'd said something about how the view made everything else feel small. I remembered that. I carried the ring in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks waiting for the right moment. I almost did it at a gas station once because she was standing in the parking lot laughing at something on her phone, and the light was hitting her face just right, and I caught myself thinking, yeah, this is the person. But I waited because I wanted it to be right. The day I actually did it, I was so nervous I almost tripped on the trail going up. She asked if I was okay, and I said, yeah, just watching my step, which was technically true. When we got to the top, she was standing there looking out at the view, and I just did it. No big speech. No rehearsed lines. I just said, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. She said yes before I even finished asking, grabbed my face with both hands and said, yes, obviously yes. Are you kidding me right now? We stood there holding each other while some random hiker walked past and gave us a thumbs up. Neither of us cared. We could have been standing in a parking lot for all it mattered. I remember my hands were shaking the same way they shook in that parking lot the night I found out about everything. But this time it was for the opposite reason. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Real friends. Her family, who had welcomed me from day one. Her parents. Her sisters. Her grandmother, who kept calling me the good one, even though she had never met anyone from my old life. That woman just decided I was good, and that was that. It rained that morning but cleared right before the ceremony, and Audrey smiled and said, see, even the weather's on our side. Her sister rolled her eyes, but she was crying and smiling at the same time. After the ceremony, her dad shook my hand and said, welcome to the family, son. I had to look away for a second because that one sentence from a man I had known for 18 months hit harder than anything my own family had ever said to me in 30 years. Nobody from my old life was invited. Nobody from my old life even knew I got married. It's been 3 years now. I've been promoted twice. Audrey and I bought a house, a little 3-bedroom with a yard that needs work. The first weekend there, we pulled weeds, and she kept finding random garden gnomes the previous owner had buried in the flower beds for some reason. We found 4 of them. She lined them up on the porch and named every single one. That's who I married. We had a daughter, Nora. She has Audrey's laugh and my stubbornness. And she is without question the best thing that's ever happened to me. She just started walking, and every day she discovers something new she can get into. Last week, she pulled every single book off the bottom shelf and sat in the middle of the pile looking proud of herself. Audrey took a picture. Life is actually full now. Really full. Not the fake kind of full where you're busy all the time because everyone needs something from you. Rachel's apology came after Kyle flopped. Not after the betrayal. Not after the family meeting. After the gamble didn't pay off. That's not remorse. That's buyer's regret. And Audrey's dad saying, welcome to the family, son. 5 words from a man I'd known 18 months. That meant more than 30 years with my own blood. That says everything. Now for the final update. Final update. I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. I usually don't answer numbers I don't recognize. I learned that lesson the hard way when a cousin once tried to reach me through a coworker's phone. But something made me answer this one. It was Michelle. She said she'd been trying to reach me for months. She told me we needed to talk about Kyle. I told her I don't have a brother. She said Kyle was in a facility that he'd been struggling ever since I left, lost his job, got into some bad stuff, pushed everyone away, and tried to hurt himself last month. I won't pretend that didn't hit me. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the counter for a long time. Whatever he did, he's still the kid I used to pick up from school. The kid I taught to ride a bike in the driveway while Mom watched from the porch. The kid who used to fall asleep on my shoulder watching movies on the couch. I used to carry him to bed when he was too small to wake up. But that version of Kyle doesn't exist anymore. The real Kyle made choices that killed that person just as much as they killed our relationship. I asked if he was alive. She said yes, he's getting help, but he keeps asking for me. Says he can't move forward until he makes things right. She started begging. She said she knows what he did was awful and they all messed up. But he's our brother and he needs me. I told her he stopped being my brother when he chose to betray me. She tried saying he was young and stupid. He was 26. I was 28. We were both grown men making grown decisions. And every single person in that family chose him over me. Every one of them. Then I finally said what I'd been thinking for 3 years. This isn't really about Kyle struggling, is it, Michelle? It's about the fact that you all made the wrong choice. And now you have to live with it. I hung up. Audrey was across the room. Nora was asleep in her arms, her little fist wrapped around the collar of Audrey's shirt the way she always does when she's fighting sleep. Audrey asked what that was about, and I told her everything. She shifted Nora to one arm and hugged me with the other. A month later, I got an email from Mom. It was the longest thing she'd ever written to me. Probably took her hours. She said she knows she wasn't fair to me, that choosing Kyle over me was wrong, that she should have stood up in that living room and told Kyle he was wrong instead of asking me to forgive him. She said she replays that family meeting in her head all the time and hates herself for what she did. That she chose the easy son to side with because Kyle was always the one who needed more, and she knows that's not an excuse. She said she's sorry. She doesn't expect me to come back. She just needed me to know she knows she failed me. She said she hopes someday I'll let her meet her granddaughter. That email messed me up for a few days. I'm not going to lie about that, because part of me had been waiting 3 years to hear those exact words. Part of me wanted to call her right then and pretend none of it ever happened. Go back to Sunday dinners and holidays and just being her son again. But the other part of me, the part that spent 3 years rebuilding from nothing, knew that going back wouldn't be going home. It would be going backward. And I didn't come this far to go backward. I showed it to Audrey. She read it twice, then looked at me for a long time and said, "I think she's 3 years too late, but it's your call." I sat with it for a week. I reread it probably 10 times. I kept opening it on my phone during lunch breaks at work, staring at it, then closing it again. One night after Nora was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote back. I told her I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't undo the damage. She chose Kyle. She made me feel crazy for being hurt and let everyone else do the same. I have a family now, a real one. I hope Kyle gets the help he needs. I hope she stays healthy. But I'm not coming back. She wrote back, "I understand. I love you." I didn't respond. Last week, I got a text from Kyle's number. He said he's sober, 6 months clean, working through a lot, and knows what he did was unforgivable but needed to say it anyway. He said he destroyed my life because he was selfish and weak, that he took advantage of my kindness and threw it away for someone who didn't even matter in the end. He said I was the best brother anyone could ask for, and he repaid me by sleeping with my fiancée in my house while I planned a wedding. No excuse. He doesn't expect a response. He just needed me to know he knows what he did. I read it. Then I read it again. I sat in the garage for a while with the door open. I could hear Nora inside laughing at something. Audrey was in the kitchen. I could smell whatever she was cooking drifting through the doorway. When I went back inside, I showed Audrey the text. She read it at the counter with a towel over her shoulder and asked if I was going to respond. I really thought about it. Kyle sounded genuine. He'd clearly done some real work on himself. Part of me wanted to believe people can change, that my little brother was still in there somewhere. But then I thought about that family meeting, about watching him cry while everyone comforted him and nobody even looked at me, about my mom going to him after I walked out, about walking into my own bedroom, about those 6 months, about Nora's laugh, about Audrey's hand in mine, about the 4 garden gnomes lined up on the porch of a house I bought with a woman who chose me without making me earn it every single day. I deleted the message. Audrey kissed my forehead and said, "I'm proud of you." Then Nora came running into the room yelling, "Daddy, play with me." I scooped her up and she giggled. Audrey smiled. Yesterday, someone tagged me on Facebook. It was Michelle. Family photo. Mom, Michelle, Kyle, a few cousins. They were at some barbecue. Everyone smiling. Kyle looked thinner than I remembered. The caption said, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up." I untagged myself, blocked Michelle, closed my phone, and went outside where Audrey was sitting on the porch with Nora on her lap, pointing at a bird in the yard. I went back to my life. I think about the porch sometimes. The weekend we stained it. How normal everything felt. The pizza. The wedding talk. Him practicing his best man toast out loud and messing up the same line over and over until we were both cracking up. I wonder if he thinks about that day too. I don't know. And I've stopped needing to know. And that's where Grant leaves it. 3 years later. Wife, daughter, house. A career built from nothing after his brother and his fiancée burned his old life down, and his entire family told him he was the problem for being upset about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should he have responded to Kyle's message? Was ignoring his mom's cancer the right call? Hit subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.